everyone. So my day job is usually spent behind a cow, in surgery with dogs and cats or doing horse dentals, but a huge part of my job is around disease investigation and supporting our producers in the north in keeping Australian meat green and clean. So biosecurity is a huge topic, and when you add words like cultural and social to it, it just gets much bigger. I only have 5 minutes, and so I thought I'd just throw the big picture out first and then zoom in to where I'm actually looking at. So just for a bit of context, the Northern Australian beef industry contributes over $5 billion to the Australian economy. When we talk about exotic diseases particularly, foot and mouth is often straight in the mind. A small foot and mouth disease outbreak in the southern systems, so intensively managed operations, is expected to cost upwards of $7 billion. That same disease outbreak in Northern Australia is likely to cost upward of $16 billion. So they're big numbers and they have huge impacts. And that's not even considering the social and community impacts that a disease like foot and mouth would have. But really, what I was interested in was what was happening on the ground. I wanted to see what actually happened and not what the paperwork says. So for me, my interest was this red button and how do we get it pressed? So this is when someone notices something wrong and they pick up the phone. So I guess I was really lucky enough as part of my GFP to meet up with the Rabobank Northern Beef Tour, and I was especially lucky to meet a Tambo beef producer who had this conversation once I said what I was interested in looking in. And he said, I have a young girl, she's joined my farm, she has no idea about ag. We're currently undergoing a greater grass eradication program, and she came up to me the other day and said, I think I've seen some greater grass on the road on that paddock. And he went, we've treated that paddock, there's nothing there. And he left it. A few weeks later, he went back out to the paddock and drove along the road, and he realised he had a problem. And it wasn't just because he had a big situation to deal with the greater grass. He realised that he had done something. He had dismissed this young girl's concerns, put her to doubt what she knew and what he now knows was correct, but realised she was unlikely to ever raise her hand again because she didn't know what she was talking about and he wouldn't take her seriously. I think for us, in the Northern Australian beef industry, this can be a huge area of concern. So really for me, it came down to the who. So we need to understand that we have an ageing agricultural demographic, especially in the northern beef industry. But what's happening around that? What's happening is that we have an increased reliance on transient workforce. So contractors, day labourers. We don't have the big family operations that are of our past. So what we are experiencing is young people coming into the industry. They're after their Yellowstone experience. They want to chase some cows, ride some horses, have a few drinks, and then they're going to move on to their real life. But that is really who is our front line of our passive surveillance system. So what I really wanted to come back to, it's the who that determines the how. We need to understand who is the front line and who are we actually targeting to give us what we need. We also need to understand that social and cultural context is important and especially relevant in a changing workforce. We need to understand that those that have time to attend seminars and workshops are probably not the ones doing the grunt work, and we need to make sure that they're able to pass on that messaging to the people that are doing that work. And finally, I think the best way to summarise it is that biosecurity threats are global, but solutions must be local. While the solutions don't have to come from the ground, they need to be able to work at ground level. That's it. Oh, sorry, I was getting a bit excited there. I would like to thank Animal Health Australia and Plant Health Australia, who supported me for my Nuffield program.
So Regan, what are some of the biggest biosecurity challenges that you came across during your travels, and what lessons can be applied here to the Australian beef industry?
So I think it's really important to recognise that trust is the building block for particularly biosecurity reporting, but not just that. Workplace health and safety, all those sort of things come into trust relationships. And if we don't develop them and nurture them, then we have an issue because there is a disconnect. And farmers, producers particularly, rely on their historical experiences to understand what is likely to happen to them going forward.
And Regan, you've obviously mentioned transient workers, and we've spoken quite a lot about this in the past. You've identified those concerns. How do you ensure those up-to-date biosecurity practices actually reach that wider workforce? Like you say, they're the front line in defence.
I think the first thing we need to do is really understand who is the front line. Like I've said, it is a changing and evolving workforce. We know that's happening. We know they're hard to connect to. And really, for me, I think the best way forward is not just giving our managers, our leadership, the information. We need to equip them with skills to ensure that that is disseminated down so that they're able to deal with a transient workforce that's rotating in and out. It's nice to think that once you're in ag, you're going to stay in ag, but we all know that's not true.
You showed us a slide with the big red button. What are those main barriers to reporting these disease outbreaks?
So, like I've touched on, trust is a huge one, and that's very global. There is a real sentiment of distrust of government. They're out for themselves. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase. But there's a lack of understanding as well of what does it really mean practically for your future of your operation. Lots of us have seen the scary pictures that came out of the UK foot and mouth epidemic, and they really have put a deep fear into beef producers about what their future could look like and how it could play out.
And of course, you talked earlier about the importance of communicating these messages. Obviously, here in the show, you've talked about the foot and mouth outbreak in the UK, which was a horrendous time for the UK. But actually getting those messages out to those really diverse and geographically quite diverse audiences as well, how does that work out practically?
So it is obviously always at the forefront of these people trying to get this information out. But I think we need to understand that actually the Northern Australian beef industry is quite well connected. It's a community-based, there's a lot of pride in being part of the northern beef industry. And what we really need to do is just make sure we're tapping in with relations of trust to get into the community and provide safe channels of communication where questions can be asked without fear of repercussions.
Regan, thank you so much. I'll ask you.